Hi, how are you? What brings you here today? Movie reviews, that's what. Shh. Let's not kid ourselves. You want to know about the latest movie I watched. Today's film is Mutant. Mutant. Mutant? That's Mutant? Nah, it's Mutant. Mutant! Hey everybody, it's Kyle. Doing another film review. And this movie is neat. It's not good. Don't go pursuing this movie because you think it's gonna be good. It's a neat film. It makes some very interesting choices. And it makes some choices that even the most veteran and jaded horror films might go, okay, that was actually kind of unexpected. From the casting to the story events to some of the story beats, it's pretty predictable in some regards. I mean, they kind of do a lot of setups and payoffs, and you kind of know where it's going. But they do throw some curveballs at you, and I think that's what you want in a good B movie. You want them to do something interesting that you wouldn't expect from a big production film or a competent film. It's not good. It's not horrible. It's a hard B movie. It's almost in the C category. A lot of this film's weaknesses are in the budget and the set location, set design choices. They kind of the camera works a little bit flat in a lot of places, or the sets are a little flat, or God, some of the sets are so outrageous they kind of just pull you right out of the movie. There's just one house in particular, the wallpaper just blasts you out of this world. But the film is. You can tell watching this film that some of the acting is very enthusiastic and some people are putting some genuine effort into their craft, and some of the people are phoning it in. And I think that really is everywhere in this film. Like, sometimes the set design and camera work is okay. Most of the time it's not. Sometimes the makeup is okay. Most of the time it's not. Sometimes the acting is okay. Most of the time it's not. I'm not going to give away the story's biggest twist, right? So from here on out, it's spoilers. But I do want to say that I would like to see this movie remade with some script changes. And I'll get into that at the end. Some things that I think would make this a competent or strong story outside of, what was already done. This film did do some interesting things, and things that I would have liked to have seen, that I would like to see done in newer films. Mostly because I think that things have become so formulaic that you go into a horror film and you're not so much caught off guard, you're just trying to follow the paces. It's kind of like that slasher film effect where it's like, I just want to see some interesting kills, right? It's like, I want there to be a little, like a spoonful of character development between the two main characters. Everyone else are kind of like, these archetypes to be slaughtered by the monster or the bad guy or the slasher. But I think this film takes an interesting approach in how they treat its main characters, and I'll get into that. So, spoilers ahead, and you really don't have to worry about that because it's like, you're probably not going to see this film. So, this film is following two brothers, Josh and Mike. Now, these two brothers are on a road trip. They're going kind of they're taking, I guess, a short time. The old detour story, These two youngsters are wild and crazy. They're getting all footloose or whatever they did in the 80s. So yeah, plot synopsis. So this movie just starts off around the side of a house and it's dark because, that's what the script and the budget need to have happen. He's apparently collecting yellow gunk with an eyedropper. It looks kind of like dog crap. And so immediately the audience is probably asking all the wrong questions. They're probably, like me, asking, why is he collecting dog crap with an eyedropper? I don't know. Let's find out. Maybe they'll unravel that mystery here in the film. Anyways, he immediately just makes a beeline straight for the storm cellar, gets in there, and he's walking around in this well-lit, dark basement. because I don't blame the lighting choices. They need to separate the background from the foreground, and there's so much clutter. I get it. All right, it's the best they could do. So the guy finds a dead body, gets strangled, lifted up off his feet, falls down, and dies of rapid onset emphysema with smoke coming up out of his neck. It happens to the best of us. Just most of us, emphysema takes years and years and years to kill us. Some people, they get right to the point. If you or a loved one has been diagnosed with mesothelioma. And so yeah, it's our first on-screen murder. Yay! That kind of sucked. I really wish I'd have seen the look of shock on his face a little bit more. Like, oh God, I'm being strangled. But All right, so now we're moving on to these two cool guys. This guy's Mike, and this guy's Josh. Now, Mike is handsome, morally centered, driven, inquisitive, and he always does the right thing. And this guy over here is Josh. He's kind of sloppy and crusty and sleazy, and he's a chucklehead. So anyways, yeah, they're driving on the highway. They're a little lost. The map's not really showing them where they're going, and then Josh decides he's going to yuck it up and be the chucklehead older brother and just kind of be like, oh, I lost control. I've fallen asleep at the wheel. He's being a schmoozer. And he ends up driving head on towards this truck. They end up veering back. They course correct, right? They get their car back on the road. Yeah, well, these hillbillies, they're not having it. These city boys, as they call them. And they decide they're going to run them off the road, as, one does, because the plot needs for it to happen. And, runs them off the road. Okay, whatever. It's a movie. It's another hitchhiking. Their car's in a ditch. They're hitchhiking. And then they're not so successful hitchhiking. But eventually they come across this colorful-looking fellow. The archetypical hillbilly and an ascot. I mean, every movie's got one, right? They don't? They make small talk on the drive. Basically, they're going to talk about the rifle in the background, and that leads into, well, we're hunting little green men. And this is kind of the first series of hints that you're in a monster movie, and the locals kind of know what's going on in the town. It might not be, fully understood, but some people know a little something what's going on. So that's your first hint. And yeah, they get a ride into town, and they decide they're gonna go to the local bar, call for a tow truck, what have you. The young guys, hey, the cool, the yucking it up. Well, the younger brother, Mike, hears something, and of course, is the morally centered and handsome character. He's gonna investigate, and his sleazy brother's like, hey, look, it's not worth it, don't do it. Anyway, Mike decides to barrel on forward, and he finds a hobo in his pupil stage as he begins to sloth out of his human-like cocoon, and... No, what they do find is our first mutant. Mike rushes over to the bar, Josh, of course, going, hey, maybe we shouldn't get involved with this. Maybe this isn't going to go well for us. Maybe we should just get out of town, get our tow truck. They make a call, but while they're at the bar, they run into the same local yokels who rode them off the road. And, this well-rounded and emotionally stable individual decides he's going to be the toughest, meanest guy in town and just really give these city boys what for. And Jesus Christ. Of course, one of the local lawmen shows up and straightens things out. But, Jesus Christ, he cut a guy. I guess in a movie or in a small town or whatever, that stuff all's, part of the course. Yeah. The sheriff ends up going back and they go look for the dead body or whatever, and then the sheriff does take a small sample. And that's what you get. It's like, all right, well, there's no dead body, it's a sleeping hobo, but there is this goop I keep finding. I'm going to take this to the doc. Anyways, this serves as a means to get us to the local doctor. And the local doctor is probably going to be an important character here since it's a film about mutants. So the local doctor patches him up. They have a little back and forth. So he gets this thing to the doc, and then he makes sure these two young men find lodging. And they are at this seemingly nice lady's house, huh? Let's let them both drop their guard and see what happens. Yeah, they're yucking it up, and Josh is being a chucklehead, and, it's fair enough. But I think he spots something out of the window. Nothing to look into there, though. I'm sure everything's just fine. Everything's fine. It's fine. Oh yeah, it turns out some of our local people are getting sick, and that's, building into the script. It's one of those setups we were talking about earlier. They do the setup where it's like, oh, my loved one's sick. Can I get some medicine? Sure, here's some medicine. they're setting it up that there are things going on in the town, and now you're being keyed into it. And I thought that was nice. Anyways, our handsome and morally driven main character decides to get up out of bed after he hears something at night, and holy Jesus Christ, they killed him. They killed our clearly set up main character. Now, I've often wondered in this film if that was a script choice, if that was a deliberate, like, we actually want to have this twist in here. If the other actor was like, look, I just don't want to be in this film a whole lot, and he just walked off. Like, that could have happened. I could definitely see that happening. It's like, look, I don't want to be your main character. This movie sucks. And just done. Or maybe he was only budgeted. Maybe he's only budgeted for the other, and the other actor's like, hey, look, I'll take half of whatever that guy's making if you make me the protagonist. And they were like, deal. When you get a low budget film like that, I always wonder if those are choices being made out of desperation, out of necessity, or if they genuinely had such a weird and asymmetrical script that was the actual intentional setup for this film. But anyways, the guy who's clearly the main character died. Now we're dealing with this sleazy, schlocky older brother who's not great to look at. He's like John Lithgow. That's actually one of the things I like about this movie is even though he's not fun to look at, he's actually a pretty decent actor. At least he gives a good effort in this. Like, the Mike guy, it felt like he was phoning it in. It doesn't really feel like this was kind of his movie. But this Josh guy, he's actually kind of got some expression, we'll say. He's got some acting chops. Brings something to the table here. And a lot of stuff happens because the script needs it to happen, but I feel like this guy actually did not phone this in. I feel like he gave a genuine effort. And you can see that later on in the film in a few shots. Anyways, Josh wakes up the next morning and he's like, yo, where's my brother at? And she's like, well, you know, he's probably out and about. So it's like she's clearly in on the shenanigans and murder. But again, we don't quite know what's going on. We know that there's something going on that's making people sick. And we know from the way beginning of the movie there are mutants. And they choke people and smoke comes out of their body or something. I don't know. So Josh decides he's going to stroll all around town. Now, I don't blame the guy. This is back before cell phones and stuff. So, you know, he goes back to the tavern he was at last night to go check to see if anyone had seen or heard of his brother, right? That's a pro move. And he meets this lady and he starts schmoozing it up and he charms her. Look at that. It's kind of nice. Makes it feel like a guy like me might have a chance at one of them females one day. Yep. Anyways, the doctor basically talks to the sheriff. And this is where we're starting to get hints that the sheriff's a drunk. Because she basically makes him a V8. It's like a hangover remedy. She makes him V8. And you think it's going to be some weird lab test based on the thing from last night, but no, it's a V8. They start to examine the weird sample they found, and she starts to say that it's mutated blood. And then somebody breaks in and steals all of their blood samples. Again, starting to look like zombie vampires. That's because, all right, they are. This guy still hasn't found his brother, but he's hanging out with this girl who apparently works at the bar and is somehow involved in the local school area. What have you. It's great. The story needs for the stabbing. Oh, look at that. That's another setup. We're going to form an emotional attachment to this kid and nothing bad will happen to him. That'll be great. And then he starts to hear some noises and look into things. Starts sauntering around this foreboding-looking basement. Actually, not too bad lighting. Oh my God, a dead kid has dropped on us. Oh, this looks bad. The guy him and his brother got in a bar fight with, the guy who rode him off the road, he is the school janitor, and we are having another confrontation with a ne'er-do-well in this film. That is terrific. Janitor's trying to go ahead and take his whole damn day out on this stranger. And the Josh character's just trying to, you know, just get by, find his brother, and get out of town. The local sheriff is just kind of being a chucklehead here. Talks to the budding romantic interest of Josh. And then he decides he's going to have a little drinky poo. Aha, I knew it. Our sheriff's a lush. Well, hopefully he gets some character development and, you know, he decides that maybe being drunk all the time is not as productive as it could be. Or hopefully this film does something interesting and he goes in a terrible downward spiral. That would be so good for me. Anyways, enough about me romanticizing drunks. So the kid gets carted off. The sheriff and the local doctor have this exchange. And she really wants to see this kid's body and do some examinations on it. And so the sheriff finally goes, whatever, that's fine. Nothing bad will happen to me if I release this kid's body into your custody. Anyways, it turns out that our Josh character is a stowaway with our pretty teacher like lady, and the sheriff starts to investigate some of the local goings on, and oh no, another dead body! A mutant! He's a mutant. Anyways, he phones it in, waits for backup to arrive, and decides after a few sips that he's gonna quit the bottle. There we go, a little bit of that character development we were talking about. Uh-oh, pretty romantic interest has a sick father at home. Well, that won't have a setup and payoff later. Huh? That's definitely not going to happen. All right, this is that wallpaper I was telling you about. Jesus Christ. Oh my God. Everything wrong with this movie in one shot right here. The furniture, the wallpaper, the outfits. Jesus Christ. And the romantic thing is kind of really awkward and forced. Like, hey, my brother's missing, and I just saw a kid's mutilated corpse and almost got murdered, and your dad's sick, and let's make out your living room. Okay. But then he suddenly gets collapsed and falls over, and he's sick. He goes to the doctor's office. Doctor says he's been exposed to some kind of poison. His body's been poisoned. It's fighting it off. She's going to help boost him and get him through this. You know. And then the other sheriff comes by. The one guy's body's missing. And the sheriff, I guess this is his commanding officer. And so like the deputy, I guess he's the deputy. He's not the sheriff. The sheriff comes in there, chastises the deputy, and basically it's all like, you're a drunk, your act together. She's investigating the dead kid's body. She's taking some very good notes, and then one of her co-workers is infected. And he's a mutant. He's a mutant. He's chasing her around, and she's gonna get away. She's gonna get away. Oh, wow, that's a twist. The deputy's romantic interest gets killed. Didn't expect that. That's kind of an interesting twist, because it's kind of like the whole plot was resting on her shoulders. That was interesting. Anyways, we're going to go back to Josh and the romantic interest. And he decides he saw a sign earlier in the film that really caught his attention. And he's going to try and look into that. Oh, wow. It looks like something's going on here. He decides to sneak himself in. And kind of an athletic move there. Yeah, why not? And then the big twist is the nice ascotted hillbilly is actually a malevolent guy. And they're not pulling stuff out of the ground. They're pumping in toxic waste. And I know toxic waste are bad and it's hurt people, but I'm evil. For the sake of evil. This is by far the weakest part of the movie. And then without knowing where Josh is at or what he's doing, our romantic interest drives in there and rescues him. Because the plot needs for it to happen, you know? That happens sometimes where it's just, you're in the middle of an intense scene. You're going to see how our character gets out of it. And then a supporting character who has no real understanding of what's going on or sense of urgency, drives into a place and just does stuff. Like, imagine if he hadn't been discovered and she just randomly drives into a barn. Like what? Okay. Anyways, they go find the sheriff or the deputy, and he's feeling low. And romantic interest is going to go check on her father. This is definitely the best part of the movie. This scene is bonkers. I love it. It's probably one of my absolute all-time favorite scenes in any B movie. Let's just watch this, and then we'll go through it. Watch it. It's never not funny to me. All right, the one cop gets, the deputy gets slapped to the ground. Our hero, Josh, grabs the gun, fires it at him, and blows off his pee-pee. The blood happens to be yellow, so he blows off his pee-pee and yellow sprays everywhere. And then the guy jumps out of a window and falls funny. It's like, what are you doing with this movie? This is hysterical. Like, if the rest of this movie was a comedy from this point on at that level, this would be one of the best films of all time. Because they were like playing it straight-laced up until this point, and they just decided to go Looney Tunes. Oh my God. And see, here's the thing. It's like, as I've watched this, it's like, I think they had a prop set up where it's like, the tummy area is supposed to blow out. But they settled it low, right? And so, because the guy's leaning forward, like if he was straight up, it would look like maybe his tummy blows out. But because he's leaning forward, it looks like he just shot in the ding dang dong. It's so crazy. uh, what? This scene is so weird. Anyways, her father's a mutant, and he's running around with his pee-pee blown off. That's what he's doing. So yeah, they decide to go back, because there's only like, I don't know, 5 sets in this movie. And they're going to go back to the sheriff's deputy's office, whatever. And he's gonna look up into stuff, make some calls, and then they're going to check in on the doctor. And this is actually not bad. This part is actually not bad. He finds the kid's body. He sees a mutant, starts shooting the mutant. Other mutants show up, and then he finds he finds the doctor, the woman he loves, and she's dead. And it's like, that's actually kind of, that he found her is kind of an interesting thing while he was out there trying to play the hero. And he's like, I'm going to find her and rescue her. And it's like, oh, that's kind of a letdown for him. But, she does manage, because she had that recorder on her, she does manage to have some useful information to advance the story even after she died. Josh goes back to the place where he was staying at to try and look for his brother again. He's not quite accepting that his brother might be dead yet, so he ends up getting locked in a basement. And this is kind of actually another rough spot in the movie. It's like, this movie did some interesting things and made some really interesting choices. It just didn't come together. Like, some films just never come together, and this is one of those films. Anyways, he's locked in the basement. He's getting sicker and sicker. They're actually doing some makeup on him where it's starting to look like that infection they talked about earlier is kind of setting in. And he finds his dead brother, and his dead brother, he has this it's kind of touching moment where his brother's dead, and he's kind of cradling him. One of the weird parts is his brother's arm bandage is gone, if you're a continuity guy. Anyways, there's a mutant in there. He tries to get out. She grabs his leg and pulls him back in. And he finds a blowtorch, and then the lady comes in, and he throws the lady in the basement with her daughter. I guess the daughter became a mutant. Yeah. Anyways, main character gets out of there. He doesn't get fully infected. He's still kind of like going through these rounds of infection. It looks like he's like, getting sick, shaking it off, getting sick, shaking it off. It kind of works. There's a little bit of tension there kind of building up because they're making some interesting choices with lighting and makeup there. And then this lady, this is a weird part of the movie. And it's kind of one of those setups and payoffs I was talking about. They set up that there's this kid she really cares about. She goes to the school, finds this kid, right? Oh, you're safe now. And they're going to make it out, right? Well, nope. This is, again, another interesting choice. This kid does not make it. But Josh happens to be there in time and saves romantic interest. But that kid gets straight up picked apart. This is... any movie where they go big and go that whole like violence against a child arc, it's like that's a dicey move, but they went for it. So, anyways, basically, this school scene kind of degenerates to a bunch of infected kids trying to kill everybody, and our 2 protagonists escape. They're gonna try and get out of town, and they end up going back to the doctor's office because they don't fully know what happened. Find the deputy guys, his badge, his hat, his gun, all that stuff. And then, our main character leaves the girl for a while, comes back to rescue her. They get in there. One of the cool things they did is they had this thing where it's like the mutants' hands are like melting through the glass. I was like, that's kind of cool. It's like, whatever, they're so toxic or poisonic or radioactive. I don't know what they're really trying to do. I think that's one of the weak parts of this film. It's like they're trying to give this kind of sense of like danger with the monster's hands or whatever, but it's like toxic blood is infectious toxic blood turning people into mutants. It doesn't really make sense to why their hands melting through the glass, but it's kind of cool. I wish they'd have like, it feels like they were originally going to go for like aliens or radioactive, and then they settled on like a blood disease where there was some kind of like chemical warfare or toxic warfare thing going on, but it doesn't really kind of translate to that. It's just kind of like, okay, well, their hands melt glass. Interesting choice. Just doesn't really feel like it was like carried with the script as to why their hands would do stuff like that. Anyways, this is going to be the big climax of the film. They make it to a gas station, and this is going to be their last stand. So yeah, I guess the main villain, Albert, the janitor weird guy, he's waiting there, and of course, I mean, because, why not? His plot is kind of just a lot of coincidences and people connecting all over. It's whatever. Anyways, he shows back up, and he's got a shotgun, and he's going to take romantic interest out and shoot her, or use her as bait, or whatever he wants to do, because, he's a sleazebag. And our main protagonist finally beats him, and then, makes him do this whole I'll give you a last chance kind of thing. But then the villain guy is ripped out of the window by the mutants and picked apart. So, and then the cops show up and save the day. That's the end. It kind of looks like our heroes aren't going to make it. They're surrounded on all sides, and then a bunch of cops show up and just mow everything down. And so one of the weird things is, like, I guess the deputy saved the day or whatever. He got the right people, called the right departments, went over the head of the sheriff or the whoever was in charge. It doesn't matter. It's not important. And then, you know, but he like left his pistol and everything behind. It's like, dude, you don't get to really do that in a crisis like this. But they make it imply that he was killed, and then it's like, aha, I didn't really die. I just left all these things there that would lead you to believe that I might have died. In case you came looking for me, I wanted to, you know, set that up. And then also, I just knew. I knew you'd be at the gas station. Don't ask how I knew. I just knew. Also, we've arranged our cars in this really nice semicircle. Why? We don't know, but we like it. We like it that way. This would be like, you know, as far as B movies go, this would be one of those films that does enough interesting things where it's like, okay, I like parts of this movie, but overall this movie kind of sucks. It kind of sucks bad. The things that like suck about this movie are mostly baked into the script. The one part where the girl drives the car into the barn and rescues the guy. How does he know? How does she know he's in danger? Like, how does she know? How does she know he's in danger? She just otherwise would have just drove her car into a barn. And we're like, oh, it looks like you guys are working here. Sorry. What? You know, the gas station thing. How the cops all know they were going to be at that gas station, take a nice pristine semicircle and just shoot all the mutants, and that was kind of weak. And how did they know they'd be at the gas station? How'd they know? It's like, okay, whatever movie. And so some of those things fall really short. Some of the things that I think really worked and were really interesting. Yeah, the character, the Mike character, who looked like he was going to be the main character, he actually gets killed, and he gets killed pretty like gracelessly. He just gets pulled under a bed and he gets smoked. He gets mutant smoked. And then the older brother, who you would not have expected to be the protagonist, steps up, and I thought that was interesting. You don't get to see that a lot. Usually the handsome, you know, clean-cut guy is usually the one who gets to be your protagonist. And this one they kind of went with, like, the weird guy. The chucklehead got to be the protagonist. And another thing I like that is throughout the whole film, like, Mike would have been a good character to be like, I want to get to the bottom of this and solve this. But his brother doesn't seem to be motivated by that. His brother, the main character Josh, seems to be motivated just in finding his brother and getting out of here. And then he gets sidetracked by a lot of things because, you know, it's like it was hard for him to find help. He finally found someone to help him, and he kind of invested that person since he might be in town for a couple of days looking for his brother if things have gone south. I like the kind of the idea of the mutant. Like, I like this kind of vampire zombie thing. I think the weird hand things, I don't necessarily have to like or dislike that. I like all the you know, they leave pus everywhere or whatever, the ooze, and I think that was kind of a good, like, initial kind of those breadcrumbs for the storyline, but it kind of really didn't do anything but make the movie weird. And the whole thing of it being like a blood disease, and it's like, all right, are these vampires, right? Is it like an infection? Is this like a chemical thing? Is this a protest against chemical dumping and toxic waste? What is the whole mechanism for the mutants? What you know what I mean? Because it's like people in the area are just getting sick, right? And so when they get sick, that onset takes a while, right? But if they get smoked by a mutant, they turn into a mutant, and like that's pretty instantaneous. That's a really quick onset. So you can get grabbed by a mutant, you'll become a mutant really quick, or you'll just be in the city and be exposed to stuff, and it's a really slow onset. And it's like, it's not quite clear exactly the mechanism that's working. It's like, it's a blood disease. It's like, oh, okay. But then you're draining somebody else's blood through the cuts in your hand or whatever. And then that infects them. And it's like, it's just not obvious. Because it's like, if they're draining your blood, then they don't have blood to be infected because they're dead. But then that still infects them and turns them into mutants. And it's like, it's a big kind of like circular logic kind of thing that I'm just dealing with, where it's like there's just no, just the plot needs for this to be a thing, and you're not supposed to really think about it too hard. So I think that would be three big things you'd need to clear up in this film for it to work. One, the delivery mechanism of the mutants. That needs to be cleaned up. Because it's like, okay, well, it's quite clear you're talking about like chemical dumping and toxic waste and all that. Whatever, that was a big thing in the 80s. But have something a little creative. I think I looked up on IMDb, and one of the things is this was originally like a biological warfare thing. And I think that would have made a little more sense, where it's kind of like this is some biological agent that it's like, that actually kind of makes sense, because it's like a disease, it's like a plague, and you can kind of get exposed to it, and it would onset slower. Or it would be like you could be rapidly exposed to a high level of like this agent, and it would, like, okay, that works. But the way this film has it is like, it's not a chemical agent, it's just chemical dumping. And it's like, okay, but that doesn't really seem like, I feel like you'd get like lymphoma or something like that, or you'd get cancer, and that would be like, that's the that would be the mutants you get. It's like, I've got like bone cancer because they dump toxic waste. It's not like, hey, I'm infected and I touched a guy and then, you know, he's infected, or maybe he's just dead, or I don't know, because the plot's not very clear. So that's the first thing. There's that delivery mechanism. Again, if the plot's original story was that it's some like toxic agent that, you know, causes people to transform, or that it's like a plague or a contagion, like that works. That's perfectly fine. But just to say like toxic waste is bad, so therefore mutants. Ugh. Okay, let's not do that. Like, I think it should be one or the other. Either the toxic waste makes the mutants, and mutants don't make other mutants, or mutants have like this plague-like thing, and only a mutant can make a mutant, but being exposed to toxic waste doesn't make you a mutant. All right, that's the first thing. The second thing this film needs to do, this film needs to tighten up some of the coincidences, right? You know, the whole driving into the car, the barn to save someone, the sheriff knew to show up at the gas station with all the cops, even though there's no communique between the... Just tighten up all the coincidences, all right? You could probably do for more than just one main villain who shows up like 4 times to be a jerk-off in the movie. You could probably sublease that to other villains, maybe, or like a gang. Kind of take that RoboCop approach, where maybe you have that gang of 4 in the beginning where they run them off the road, and that you have 4 different instances. You have to establish each 4 of these characters, maybe do a sidebar, maybe just 3 minutes where you see these guys interact in the film, and then one by one the main character has to confront those 4 individuals. I think that would have worked a lot better than having this one guy 4 times. So little things like that, where I think the small changes to this film and script could have taken it from like a sleazy bad B film to like a high B film, like a really solid B film. Heck, I would like to see this movie remade with some competent script and changes. I like some of the things they did. So I said a lot of little things were, oh my God, they got to keep the pee-pee shot. Like, they just, blowy. They got to keep that. If they do a remake, in fact, I want more of that. I want 3 of those in the next, if they do a remake, I want 3 of those pee-pee shots. That'd be great.